If you want to hit your tennis forehand with more power so you can take over points and crush your opponents, then you've clicked on exactly the right video. You're about to learn how to store and release energy with your body smoothly and effortlessly. Plus, as a bonus, you'll see how to turn an ordinary paperclip and rubber band into a lethal weapon that destroys this pickleball. Let's jump right in so that you can turn your forehand into a lethal weapon too. Hey, my name is Ian Westerman, and over the last 16 years, I've helped more than 1 million tennis players improve through my videos, my podcasts, and my top-rated book on Amazon. Phase 1 of hitting a big, powerful forehand is storing energy in the body. The reason why the open stance and variations of the open stance have become such an integral part of the modern game of tennis is it allows for more court coverage and range while also storing a huge amount of force and energy in the body, in the biggest, strongest parts. So as Alcaraz gets set here in a semi-open stance, I want you to notice the difference in the angle between where his hips are facing and where his chest and shoulders are facing. His chest and shoulders are facing straight on towards the camera, maybe even a little bit to the left of the camera, while his hips are facing out a little bit to the right of the camera. And what that means is we've created a stretch here which stores energy in his torso that we can use to unwind towards the ball. Next, as that big stretch in his torso starts to unwind, watch his racket in his hand. There's going to be a second stretch that happens here. As his body and his hips start to unwind in this direction, his hand, his forearm, and his shoulder get laid back and stretched back behind him, which creates a second storage of energy that he can then release through the point of contact. Recently, my friend Thomas from Feel Tennis, which you should definitely go check out and subscribe to on YouTube, has uploaded a series of videos showing footage from above the body, and it's a perfect angle to be able to see these things in action. So Thomas here is also using a semi-open stance, and from a top-down view, look at how his shoulders have turned past the angle of his hips. His shoulders are a little bit past perpendicular to the baseline, just like Carlos, while his hips are a little bit short of perpendicular to the baseline, also just like Carlos. From this preparation position here with his torso coiled and stretched, I want you to look at the position of his hand, how he's got a little bit of a bend back with his hand, but not very much. And now as he starts to unwind and turn with the big parts of his body, keep your eye on his hand and his racket. As his chest and his shoulders start to turn forwards, look at how this creates that secondary stretch in his hand right here. And that rotation and drop of the hand and the racket creates a stretch in his shoulder as well. And so now he's got energy unwinding this direction while energy is being stored and kind of layered on top of that unwinding of his body with his hand and his racket. And then as he continues pulling forwards and creating and holding that stretch, just before contact, he starts to release it. At the point of contact, he's not fully back to a neutral position yet with his hand, but it's returning back to a neutral position, which you can see right here. Now he's got a straight line again down the back of his hand that's parallel with his forearm. So what's happening here is a dynamic layering of different stretches and then releases of energy. And when you stack them on top of each other and you coordinate them at the right time, which we'll talk more about in just a second, then it creates a huge amount of energy and force through the point of contact without having to really work very hard or muscle through it or struggle to hit the ball with a lot of pace. And that brings us to our rubber band and our paper clip. I'm super excited. I literally haven't done this since I was a little kid. All you need to do is take a regular paper clip and bend the small part a little bit above the big part so that it creates an exposed hook. Then take the big hook of the paper clip, hook it through the rubber band, and pull back. Now we're storing energy that can be released in the direction of some other object. To learn my favorite drills that will show you how to store and release as much energy as possible into your forehand, go to forehandpower.com, where I'll show you how to add 15 miles per hour to your forehand in just 15 minutes of practicing some super simple drills. It's totally free, so go check it out at forehandpower.com. Now let's talk about effectively releasing that energy that we have stored and stretched and gotten prepared to actually send it through the ball. Check out this clip of Novak in the middle of a point here, getting ready by coiling his upper body, just like we saw from Thomas and from Alcaraz. Look at how his hips are not quite 90 degrees to the baseline, while his shoulders are significantly past 90 degrees. And I want you to look at the correlation between that preparation and the bounce of the ball on his side of the court. He's in a full turned, coiled position with all of that dynamic energy stored in his body before the ball actually hits the court on his side. Then, from this position, I want you to watch the alligator on his shirt and look at how it starts transitioning forwards now when the ball is still 6 or 7 feet away from him, so that by the time the ball arrives at the point of contact, both his hips and his shoulders have fully transitioned and unwound to a forward-facing position, which is the primary power source that delivers the racket all the way around his body and through the point of contact. Don't worry, little buddy. Almost time. Let's contrast that with what a normal everyday tennis player does. This is super, super common. The ball has bounced, and I want you to answer the question for yourself. Is this player in a physical position with his body and with his racket that he could hit the ball from here? In other words, has he gone through all of his preparation and energy storage, or is there still work to do? The ball has landed, and where Djokovic was in a full coil with his racket all the way back, ready to drop and turn forwards, this player hasn't even started taking the racket back yet. Yes, he's turned to the side, but the racket in the hand is not ready at all to swing. And so as the ball continues to get closer and closer and closer, finally the racket starts to get back into a position where he could hit the ball. And just before the ball gets to him, he's finally arrived at a coiled position, so you can see his shoulders are now turned a little bit past his hips. He's in an open stance, just like the professional players we've been looking at. But look at how the ball is right in front of him. So he's arrived at a pretty strong position here. He could use this stored energy and this stretch, this elastic storage to unwind and propel into the ball strongly, but he's waited so long for the preparation, he's waited so long to actually dynamically store that energy, that by the time he goes forwards and hits the ball, it's right in front of him, and so he's unable to actually unwind all that stored energy, and it goes to waste. He waited too long, got rushed, and as a result, he's unable to use that stored energy, and he's going to end up having to use his arm to hit a much weaker shot. Here's what that looks like from a side angle. It really kind of demonstrates it very clearly, I think. This player is also getting prepared with lots of stored energy in an open stance. Her shoulders are turned a little bit past her hips, so we've got lots and lots of stored energy here to potentially send towards the ball. But when you look at where the ball is, and how she's just gotten to that stored energy position, there's just not enough time by the time the ball gets to where she's going to be hitting it to physically unwind and utilize all that stored energy and force. So she's hitting the ball way behind her, not because her preparation wasn't solid and strong, but because the initiation of the unwinding of her body was way too late, and so all that stored energy just got wasted. A lot of times tennis players do a good job of storing and stretching, and they even do a good job of unwinding with the big parts of their body, but small parts of their body get rigid and tight, and so the flow of energy kind of gets choked off. It's kind of like, imagine I set up the rubber band here between my two fingers, and I loop this hook on the paper clip around the rubber band, and then I pull it back and I store that elastic energy. But then the second I release the paper clip, let's just say that a blast of super cold air hits the rubber band and just freezes it solid right as I let go of the paper clip. That's exactly what's happening with this player too, and what happens with a lot of everyday tennis players. He starts in a pretty loaded and stretched position in preparation for the ball to come in. Notice how his shoulders are past his hips, he's in an open stance, and he even unwinds forwards with pretty good timing forward to the ball, so that as he makes contact, his hips and his shoulders are mostly facing forwards. But if you watch him move back and forth, watch how his hand and his arm stays in one position and is locked and rigid the whole way from setup to contact. And so there isn't any secondary stretching or loading of the hand or the arm. And there's not the same dynamic whip effect of the hand or the arm laying back and then releasing through the point of contact. And so a lot of times players have the big pieces right, but because they're overly tight and tense between their shoulder and their hand, they don't get the full effect of all of the stored energy going out through their arm and into the racket and into the ball. And they also don't get to stack the different types of loading and stretching like we see from players on TV. So in a nutshell, if you want to hit your biggest forehands possible, we need to store energy dynamically and stretch the right parts of the body, then unwind and release those stretches at the right time so that we can effectively release all of that force into the point of contact. And while we do it, a lot of times this is the hardest part, we need to stay loose and relaxed so that that flow of energy can happen smoothly and efficiently. Speaking of which, it's time to light up this pickleball. I've been looking forward to this all day. All right, weapons modification here. This ended up being too big, too thick of a rubber band. So it was on the way forwards, it was catching on the rubber. It wouldn't fly forwards. Now I've got like this is a more normal sized rubber band. I took the big one just so you could see it easier. Yeah. Energy stored. Energy released. To learn my favorite step-by-step drills on how you can best store and release energy to hit your biggest, most powerful forehands ever, go to forehandpower.com, sign up for the free training there, and you'll learn how to add 15 miles per hour to your forehand in just 15 minutes of practicing a couple of simple drill progressions. Go check it out. It's absolutely free at forehandpower.com. Thanks so much for watching today. Take care. I'll talk to you again in the next one.